and welcome to My Brain is a Wonderland, the podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. You're here with your host, Emily, and today we are going to be talking about coming out to your family. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that I'm going to have a special announcement at the end of the episode regarding some new episodes and a new series that I'm going to be starting on this podcast. So let's talk about coming out to your family. And by coming out, I mean telling your family that you have been diagnosed with ADHD and or autism. I'm going to give you a little bit of a story about how I came out to my family. It's funny, it's sad. There won't be any stories about how I came out to my friends because I don't have any friends. Surprise. So let's get started. So my immediate family, who I would say is my husband and my dogs. My dogs don't really need to know. They don't get it. They just love me for who I am. My husband, I didn't need to come out to my husband. If you've listened to my first episode, which talks about how I was diagnosed, my husband was sitting in on the video call with my neuropsychologist when she told me my diagnoses. And that was my choice. I asked for him to be there for support, and maybe so that I didn't have to tell him and come out to him, right? I actually ended up being diagnosed with 9 different things, so it was just easier to have him there instead of having to tell him and to hear from the therapist directly so that we both got the same information and we could move forward easily and kind of going in the same direction. With regards to my family, I'm going to talk about 2 different parts of my family, I guess, when I talk about my direct family. When I talk about my direct family, I actually am mostly talking about my in-law family, which is my husband's family, which I think is not common for everybody. When you say your direct or immediate family, you mean your birth family. If you've listened to my podcast, I haven't gone into it super in-depth for a lot of different reasons, but I'm somewhat kind of totally estranged from my biological family. My father died when I was 4 years old. I was raised by a single mom as an only child, so I don't have any siblings. And I had just one set of grandparents because I wasn't connected to my father's side of the family. So let's first talk about my in-law family, or who I call kind of my direct family. We live close by to them, within a 2-hour drive of most of my husband's family. They really have been there for me through thick and thin in the last 15 years or so, and I've spent almost every holiday, vacation, many weekends with them, and they do truly accept me for who I am, even if they're judgmental at times. You'll have heard on the podcast different things that have been said or curiosities that have been voiced. They have been with me through thick and thin, and I love them for it. In the past, what used to happen around Christmas or Thanksgiving is, as a gift, my mother and father-in-law would pay to take me and my sister-in-law out to the mall that was in another city. You know, we would go like on a 2-hour drive in Florida to a bigger city from where they were living to go shop at the mall and get clothes. And it was really a joyous experience that I really miss. I think my sister-in-law is not such a big fan of shopping, and neither's my mother-in-law really, but we always needed clothes, and for me, I'm such a fashion addict that I always absolutely loved it. And we haven't done it in a while, but the last time we did it was Christmas 2020. Would it be 2020 or 2021? And I was diagnosed right around Christmas 2020 with ADHD and autism. And I decided that I was going to tell them during this trip that I had been diagnosed. I'm looking back now, I'm not even sure if I planned it or just decided in the moment. But I think my sister-in-law knew that I was getting, I think my sister and mother-in-law, and I think I'd mentioned it to my father-in-law as well, that I was in therapy and I was going to get assessed by a neuropsych. And I personally knew that ADHD was on the cards heavily. I hadn't told them that. And my therapist, my psychologist had brought up autism once or twice when I'd mentioned that I didn't respond to my name growing up, things like that, but I hadn't mentioned it to them. So we were in Victoria's Secret. Is it Victoria or Victoria's Secret? It's Victoria's Secret, right? That's the only one that makes sense. So, of course, when you're in a mall, that's one of the only things in there that's still alive. I can't even believe they're still going. But we were in Victoria's Secret, and my mother-in-law was at the cash register paying for the things that we had chosen. Yes, parentheses, this is a super privilege that I had never experienced before I met them, and a lot of people never will experience, and I'm super grateful for that. But my mother-in-law was at the cash register, and I don't know who brought it up, but, I said, yeah, I went for that assessment, and I was diagnosed with ADHD, and my sister-in-law was like, oh, okay, looked at me like, yeah, duh, that makes total sense. And then I said, and autism. And she went, oh! Did you hear the tone there? Oh! And I could tell from her tone and her face, bless her. She didn't mean it to come out that way, but she was surprised. I could tell that she was like, oh wow, really? And I think also when you say autism, I've had this experience in a lot of places. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but ADHD is like, ooh, the hot new thing that everyone's diagnosed with and everyone gets it. It's a focus thing. Oh, it's so silly. You talk so much. Ha 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 ha. If you say autism, people get weird. They are like, wait, autism? Like you're autistic? Like, what? They just don't understand, it's autism spectrum disorder. So they don't understand spectrum. They don't understand people falling on a certain level. I was diagnosed with level 1 autism, which generally is not defined by being nonverbal, generally not defined by having a learning disability or difficulty, which I did not have. And so I could tell from her response that she was like, well, okay. And then I think I told my mother-in-law when we were in the car on the way back from the mall, when we were driving home. And I just basically said, yeah, and I actually just told my sister-in-law that I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And my mother-in-law, who's a doctor, is so wonderful. She is so accepting I don't know if she really feels this, in home in bed at night. Is she like, wow, that's crazy, that's weird? But she's so accepting and seems genuine and feels genuine and is very much there for you and is like, wow, tell me more. Tell me how this has affected you and what it's done for you. And so I said that, and she was like, oh my gosh, that's so, she didn't say crazy, but that's great that you would, you've been diagnosed, you know how to move forward. And then my sister-in-law said, because I was a professional dancer in the past, I had a career-ending injury, and she said, wow, being a professional dancer must have been so great for your ADHD. And I said, you know what? It was great for my ADHD and terrible for my autism, which is actually true. I wish I had this photo from my first performance, not ever, but my first performance at this new job that I'd had. I cannot even describe. I look so shell-shocked by the fact that I'm performing. My face is contorting into really interesting positions. Like, I cannot mask. It's clear that I was just unable to mask in that moment. But she's right. It was great for my ADHD. It's one of the longest held jobs I've ever had and enjoyed and been able to keep and not thought about leaving, because it was always on your feet, always on the go, so I got out a lot of my hyperactive energy. The other thing is that I didn't have to do a lot of executive function in terms of administrative work, right? It was always on the go. I was a teacher as well. So I was on my feet, teaching, dancing. And the other thing was you were always learning. I think people with ADHD are so curious, and so they need that growth. We need that kind of, I'm constantly consuming. And so when you're a professional dancer, every day you are growing, developing, learning something new, working on your craft, literally for hours. And that was really beneficial for me. On the flip side, autism affected me negatively in that arena, in that I struggled with dealing with people. I'm terrible at small talk. I don't like it. It feels disingenuous. I'm not able to connect with people verbally for the most part unless I have a script, which is kind of what was given to me to be a teacher. And I was an excellent teacher, but you put me in the lobby where we're supposed to kind of just hang, and I couldn't do it. It was very difficult for me. I also needed a lot of space away after teaching. So I would be in a dance studio for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, with music playing constantly. Music was on all the time, even just lightly in the background. The lights were actually quite dim in this studio, but you're just, there's an onslaught of sensory experience when you're a dancer. Oh, you get touched all the time, right? I was a ballroom dancer, so people were touching me all the time. And I think I've spoken about this on the podcast before, but I would come home and I'd say to my husband, like, I don't want anything playing. I don't want anything on TV. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to touch anything. I don't want to be touched. I don't want to be spoken to. Leave me alone. So it actually was really hard on my ADHD. And then the performative aspect, I'm telling you, oh my gosh, I wish I had these photos. I think I deleted them off of the planet when I saw them. But I basically performed for the first time with this job. And the final photo, dude, literally, it's, in my brain, I'm smiling. You're supposed to hit the pose and you're smiling, right? I am actually giving the, like one of those contorted faces that Jim Carrey gives with all the teeth showing, and I'm wearing a barely there fishnet costume outfit string dress thing with literally a Jim Carrey Ace Ventura look on my face. It's the most ridiculous photo I've ever seen of myself, and I really struggle to perform without seeing someone do it first that I can copy. I loved the show Heroes. This is a bit of a tangent, but I loved the show Heroes that was about superheroes, and one of them was a copycat. She could literally just see anyone do anything and do it right away. I'm really that way. I'm so great at copying an accent, a behavior, a movement. And so if you show me how to act, if you say, here's the sequence of dance steps and this is how you should do it, I can do it that way. But otherwise, not good. All right, let's go back to coming out to our family, because I totally went off on a ADHD tangent there about dancing and masking. After coming out to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who I am the most close to in my husband's family, I would say, I didn't really feel the need or opportunity, I guess, to come out to his brother or father. That's kind of a personal decision. I honestly hoped that maybe my mother-in-law would just tell my father-in-law, but I don't think she did. And sometimes I think she actually forgot what I told her. I'm not really sure. But I didn't feel the need to come out to them. I would and will if it comes up. If there's any opportunity, I will absolutely do that, because I have no shame in telling people this at all. I just don't feel the need to sit them down and kind of say, hey, and we just have less time together, really, than me with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Now let's talk about my biological family, which I said was really consisting of my mother and her parents, my grandparents. And I have been estranged from them for maybe 10 years or so. I honestly don't even want to count the years. I very infrequently, maybe once a year, message my mom on Facebook, and it's tension-filled and uncomfortable and weird and strange and awful and all the things. And I've been trying to kind of reconnect with her, but I just cannot even see a way forward. A lot of people just say, call her on the phone, but when you haven't spoken to your mom in 10 years, how do you do that? Maybe a neurotypical would just say, dial the number and press call, but it seems so unfathomable to me. So about a year and a half ago, I was in contact with my mom again on Facebook, and I don't remember what facilitated this contact. I'm not sure if it was her or me or how it went down. But we'd gone back and forth a couple of times in messages, and then I basically said, I've been diagnosed with ADHD and autism. Isn't that crazy? I was just trying to kind of lighten the mood, and said, I'm trying to work with a therapist because I'd like to call you because I really miss you. Is that okay if I call you? And she messaged me back. And the thing is that she had called me this is what precipitated it. Now I'm remembering. She'd called me 2 weeks prior and left a voicemail on my phone, and I couldn't bear myself to listen to it. Anyone else like that who's neurodivergent, it's like an affront to your existence that someone texted you, or dude, if you're gonna call me out of nowhere, what is this, 1992? No, you need to text me first, or DM me. And say, hey, can I call you? And then if I say yes, you can call me. So she'd called me, left a voicemail, and I just couldn't bring myself to listen to it. So I started messaging her. And I thought it might be something important. She doesn't call just because we're not talking. She doesn't call to be like, hey, boo, let's check in. It's usually something bad. So I just couldn't bear myself to listen to it. And so I said, I was diagnosed with this, blah, blah, blah. Is it okay if I call you? And she messaged back, and she said, yes, that's okay. I was calling to tell you that your grandfather died. So it was bad, the reason she called and left the voicemail. And she didn't address the diagnoses at all. She didn't acknowledge it. She didn't say anything about it. She didn't. And I get that. We're in a very complicated, weird space right now. And obviously her father had died. I have a complicated relationship, or did, with my grandfather. He was very absent when I was growing up. He worked nights, so he was asleep always during the day. There were times where my grandmother and my mom would go shopping, downtown. And they would leave me alone with my grandfather while he was asleep. And there were times where I would be screaming and crying at the window, screaming at them not to leave me alone with him, because I just didn't know him at all. And as I got older, he was very unsupportive of the things I wanted to do, traveling, education. He was very misogynistic the first time he met my husband. I think this was around Christmas time, we were sitting in my mom's apartment, and I had made breakfast for me and my husband. We were going to share a sandwich. We both suffer from stomach issues, so we don't eat a lot in the morning. And I brought out the sandwich, and my grandfather said to me, you need to be making breakfast for your husband first before you eat. We didn't have a great relationship anyway, and things like that just pushed me away from him. I'm sure he loved me, but it wasn't a good relationship, and I cannot even imagine telling him that I have ADHD and autism. I mean, he very well may have been autistic. He was very, he suffered from addiction issues, he was withdrawn, he didn't like to socialize, he was very in his own kind of place. Maybe just depressed, maybe that was just who he was, I don't know. But that was my response from my mom, was very much didn't acknowledge it. And that's an issue that I need to deal with too. I mean, I haven't spoken to my mom barely at all in the last decade, and my expectation was that if I say to her I have ADHD and autism, that maybe she would kind of fawn over me, that she would say, oh my God, I can't, oh my gosh, that's crazy, I'm so sorry, that's terrible, I feel for you, what can I do, blah, blah, blah. That's not realistic. And I think my rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, is affecting me there, in that I always need people's approval, especially from the ones I love, and she didn't give me that approval, and quite frankly, never has. I'm going to talk about this in another episode in the future, but she's always been hard on me and always been difficult to talk to, so I thought writing it down would be easier. But now I don't even know where to go from here. If we were going to talk on the phone or in person, do I come out again? Do I say, hey, FYI, did you read that I have ADHD and autism? Did you read that I've been suffering? Did you read that almost more than likely you have ADHD and or autism? That's really not for me to say, I guess, to her face. That's up to her, but it was really complicated with my biological family, and it still is. So I just want to say to anyone listening out there, if you don't want to tell your family, if you don't want to tell anyone in your life, that's up to you. And that is totally kosher. That is what you want to do with the information about you. No one needs to know that if you don't want them to know. And if you don't feel safe or in a safe space to tell people, that's totally fine. And if you do come out to family and you receive a negative reaction, man, I am so sorry about that. Because I really haven't received a negative reaction. I've received more of a positive to a neutral reaction or to a no reaction. I recommend working with a therapist if you're about to come out or you're not sure, just to have that emotional support. And if you've gotten a neutral reaction, it's tough to deal with because, like I said, that RSD rears its ugly head. You want them to respond. You want them to say something that matters. But you know what? That's their problem. That's their problem, and that's their cross to bear, that they aren't seeing you. You know who you are. You know what you need. You know what you love. And if they don't want to be a part of that or are scared of that, then that is on them. That is not for you to worry about, to focus on, to put your passion and energy into. Just let it go. I used to work with a woman who had the slickest back. You know, it's like, just let it run off your back, run off your shoulder. And she would just not let anything faze her. I admired that aspect of her so much. She didn't let anything stick. It was always someone else's problem, you know? Not to say that we don't have problems that we impart on other people. But in this situation, if you tell someone, I am diagnosed with this, and they don't care, they don't need to care. They don't need to care for you to live the most fulfilling life that you want to live. You don't need them in your corner. Maybe you want them in your corner. I would love my mum in my corner, but quite frankly, she's never been in my corner, and I'm not sure that she ever could be. Maybe now with age and reflection, but she's never been in my corner, never been supportive of me, and that's something you have to come to terms with. You need to realize that you have everything in yourself to be the person and live the life you want to live. And I truly, truly believe that. Even with having ADHD and or autism, you can create the life you want to live and be the person you want to be without these people who don't support you. because if they don't support you or don't believe in you, then they're just dragging you down. So that's my story about coming out and it being positive and coming out and it being very neutral and a little bit sad. Now to switch gears, I'm going to talk about that announcement I mentioned at the beginning. I'm going to be launching once a month on the second to last Thursday of the month. I know, write that down. I don't even know how I just remembered to say that. But the second to last Thursday of every month, I'm going to be doing a rewatch movie episode. It's going to be called Film Fixation. And every month, I'm going to rewatch a movie and do a whole episode about it. And it's going to be a movie that I have fixated on, hyperfixated on, either in the past, throughout my life, or currently. Tomorrow's episode is going to be the 2003 movie Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan and our queen, Jamie Lee Curtis. And if you're a millennial woman listening to this show, you are going to find a lot of movies in common with yourself. I'm going to be focusing on 80s, 90s, 2000s movies that I've fixated on. In October, I'm going to do a Halloween movie or horror movie. In November, I'm going to do a Thanksgiving movie. And December, I'll do Christmas and then go on from there. If you have any suggestions for movies you'd like to hear rewatches of, just email me at mybrainisawonderlandpod@gmail.com. And you can reach me on all of the social media platforms except Twitter, TikTok, IG, and YouTube under My Brain is a Wonderland. You can find it in the show notes. And I hope to see you next time on My Brain is a Wonderland, Season 2.